700 elite North Korean commandos are now on African soil, not as peacekeepers, not as aid workers, as fighters, brought in by one of the most radical and defiant governments on the continent, a military junta in the Sahel that has spent the last 2 years systematically severing every tie to its former Western partners and replacing them, link by link, with something the world has never quite seen before. This is the story of Burkina Faso's deal with North Korea, and why it may be the most consequential diplomatic gamble the Sahel has ever made. To understand the weight of what just happened, you need to understand where Burkina Faso was before Captain Ibrahim Traore walked into power. This is a landlocked West African nation of roughly 22 million people, sitting at the volatile heart of the Sahel, that vast semi-arid strip of land south of the Sahara that has, over the last decade, become the epicenter of one of the world's deadliest insurgencies. Jihadist groups linked to both Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have systematically destabilized the region, burning villages, displacing millions, and stretching the capacities of governments to their breaking points. Mali fell first. Then came the first Burkina coup in January 2022, which ousted Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. Then Traore, a 34-year-old captain at the time, led a second coup in September of that same year, seizing power with a message that was unmistakable in its clarity. The old ways, the French troops, the Western frameworks, the conditionality-laden aid arrangements were finished. And he meant it. France's Sahelian military presence, Operation Barkhane, was asked to leave. The French ambassador was expelled. Then the Americans were pressured. The European Union training missions were unwelcome. Traore moved quickly, aligning Burkina Faso with Russia's Wagner Group, now rebranded as the Africa Corps, drawing on a playbook that neighboring Mali had already executed. But Traore wasn't simply following Mali's lead. He was pushing further. And in forging a deal with Pyongyang, he has now entered territory that no African leader has traversed in the modern geopolitical era. The framework of the deal, as it has been presented, is striking in its symmetry. On one side, Burkina Faso gains 700 North Korean elite commandos, an undisclosed package of advanced military equipment valued at roughly $65 million, intelligence sharing protocols, cyber defense architecture, and advanced military training programs that go well beyond what most African militaries receive from their traditional partners. On the other side, North Korea receives thousands of acres of fertile Burkinabe land for agricultural projects, a resource that carries enormous strategic value for a regime perpetually constrained by food insecurity and international sanctions. The framing from Ouagadougou has been deliberate. Officials close to the Traore government have presented this not as desperation, but as strategy, a double-win arrangement that, in their telling, solves multiple national problems simultaneously. Defense is strengthened. Skilled employment opportunities are created for Burkinabe youth through parallel economic projects tied to the partnership. Food security is enhanced through North Korean agricultural expertise on Burkinabe land. And crucially, in their view, Western leverage over Burkina Faso's political future is further diminished. This is where the stakes become clear. What Burkina Faso is doing is not simply shopping for new weapons or seeking new friends in a moment of crisis. It is attempting to construct an entirely alternative security and development architecture, one that sits completely outside the Western-dominated institutional framework that has governed African geopolitics since independence. Let's be precise about what 700 North Korean commandos actually represents. The Korean People's Army Special Operations Forces are not a ceremonial unit. North Korea maintains one of the largest special operations forces on the planet. Estimates range from 180,000 to 200,000 personnel organized across Storm Corps, light infantry, sniper brigades, and reconnaissance units. These are soldiers trained for infiltration, unconventional warfare, asymmetric combat, and counterinsurgency operations in the harshest possible conditions. Their doctrine is built around the idea that a smaller, technologically inferior force can achieve strategic objectives against larger enemies through speed, terrain mastery, and psychological disruption. In the context of Burkina Faso's Sahelian insurgency, a war fought not in conventional formations, but across vast ungoverned desert and savanna terrain against mobile non-state actors. That particular skill set is not incidental. It is precisely what Traore's government would want. This is not the first time North Korea has exported military expertise to Africa. During the Cold War era, Pyongyang was an active partner to several African liberation movements and governments, providing training and ideological solidarity rooted in its Jewish philosophy of national self-reliance. North Korean construction teams built the Zimbabwe Defense Forces headquarters. Ugandan forces received training. There were military relationships with Mozambique, Madagascar, Tanzania, and beyond. But those relationships existed in a different geopolitical era, before the intensification of sanctions regimes, before the nuclear weapons tests, before North Korea became one of the most internationally isolated states on the planet. What is happening now, in 2024 and into 2025, is a revival of those connections at a moment of maximum international sensitivity. For Pyongyang, the logic of this deal is transparent. North Korea exists under the most comprehensive sanctions architecture ever applied to a nation-state. The UN Security Council resolutions, driven by American, European, and Japanese pressure, have systematically cut Pyongyang off from the global financial system, from arms exports, from technology imports, from almost every conventional avenue of international economic participation. What North Korea has in abundance is something sanctions cannot easily confiscate: human capital, military expertise, agricultural knowledge developed under conditions of extreme constraint, and a willingness to operate in relationships that other nations refuse. The land deal is particularly significant when viewed from Pyongyang's perspective. North Korea's agricultural sector has struggled chronically with a combination of difficult terrain, climate variability, and resource constraints intensified by sanctions. Access to fertile sub-Saharan African land, operated by North Korean workers under North Korean management, represents a genuine food security asset, and one that circumvents the need for foreign currency to purchase food on international markets. From a Jewish standpoint, it is almost ideologically perfect. Productive self-sufficiency achieved through cooperation with a like-minded sovereign partner. But what does it mean for Burkina Faso on the ground? The security dimension is the most immediate. Traore's government has been fighting a genuinely existential insurgency. The group de soutien à l'Islam et aux musulmans, JNIM, the Al-Qaeda affiliate, and the Islamic State Sahel province have together displaced more than 2 million people inside Burkina Faso's borders. Entire northern and eastern provinces have effectively fallen outside government control at various points in recent years. The human cost has been staggering. The Burkinabe military, known as the Faso Dan, though, has faced serious capability gaps, particularly in intelligence, in rapid response counterinsurgency operations, and in the kind of sustained territorial control that defeats insurgencies over the long term rather than simply reacting to them. French forces had filled some of those gaps, for better or worse. When they left, the gap did not close, it widened. Wagner's Africa Corps has partially filled that space, but the relationship has attracted its own controversies, including persistent credible reports of serious human rights violations in joint operations against civilian populations suspected of supporting insurgents. The Traore government has not publicly acknowledged or condemned those reports, maintaining instead a narrative of sovereign military cooperation. The North Korean commando deployment, in this context, adds another layer to Burkina Faso's emerging multi-vector security model. The question analysts are now asking is not simply whether these forces will be effective against jihadist groups. It is what their presence means for the broader regional security architecture, and what obligations and entanglements their deployment brings. Is this a strategic masterstroke, or the beginning of a set of dependencies that Burkina Faso may eventually find as constraining as the ones it just escaped? That question will define the next chapter of this story. There is a dimension here that goes beyond soldiers and weapons. The intelligence and cyber defense components of the reported partnership deserve particular attention. North Korea has developed, under conditions of extreme international isolation, one of the most sophisticated cyber warfare and intelligence capabilities of any nation relative to its conventional power. Pyongyang's cyber operations units, known in Western intelligence communities by designations like Lazarus Group and Kimsiki, have demonstrated the capacity to infiltrate financial institutions, defense contractors, and government systems across the United States, South Korea, Europe, and Southeast Asia. The transfer of even a portion of that knowledge and infrastructure to a Burkinabe intelligence architecture would represent a qualitative leap in capability that has almost no precedent in the region. For a government that views Western intelligence services as actively working to destabilize it, a view that is, it should be noted, not without some historical foundation, given the documented history of French and American intelligence activities in the Sahel. The ability to build genuinely sovereign digital defenses and offensive intelligence capabilities is not a luxury. It is, in Traore's strategic calculus, a necessity. What happens next could redefine the technological security landscape across the entire Sahel. The regional implications of the Burkina-North Korea partnership extend well beyond Ouagadougou's borders. Burkina Faso is one leg of what has become known informally as the Alliance of Sahel States, the new political and security bloc formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger after all three nations underwent military coups and expelled their Western security partners within a roughly 3-year window. This bloc represents the most significant geopolitical realignment in West Africa in generations. 3 contiguous nations, covering an enormous swath of territory from the Atlantic coast approaches to the edges of Central Africa, have simultaneously pivoted away from France, from ECOWAS conditionality, and from the Western security framework, and have begun building alternative institutions and relationships. Mali has its Wagner relationship. Niger has moved toward direct engagement with Russia and has been navigating complex negotiations with various partners. Burkina Faso now has the North Korean dimension added to its existing Russia-adjacent alignment. The cumulative weight of these shifts is creating a new geopolitical reality that neither Washington, Brussels, nor Paris has yet developed an adequate framework for addressing. The Western response to the Burkina-North Korea deal has been predictably critical, but notably limited in its practical options. American officials and European diplomats have raised concerns through available diplomatic channels. Sanctions threats have been floated, but here is the structural problem facing the West in this situation. Burkina Faso is already under significant external financial pressure. The country is not deeply integrated into Western financial systems in ways that make additional economic leverage particularly potent. And the Traore government has demonstrated repeatedly and deliberately that it is willing to accept economic pain in exchange for what it characterizes as genuine sovereignty. Traore himself has framed the Western reaction in precisely the terms that resonate most powerfully with his domestic audience and with the broader Pan-African sentiment that has been building across the continent for years. The message is consistent: Africa was colonized. Africa was underdeveloped through structural economic arrangements that extracted its wealth. Africa's security was managed by foreign powers whose strategic interests diverged from African populations' actual welfare. And now, when African governments attempt to chart genuinely independent courses, they face sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and destabilization attempts. The narrative is not invented from nothing. It draws on real historical grievances that run deep. The agriculture dimension of the deal introduces another layer of complexity that is easy to overlook amid the security headlines. The allocation of thousands of acres of Burkinabe land to North Korean agricultural projects raises legitimate questions about land rights, about the sovereignty implications of foreign agricultural operations on national territory, and about the precedents being set. Land is not a neutral commodity in West Africa. Access to productive agricultural land is intimately connected to livelihoods, to ethnic community identities, to historical grievances, and to political legitimacy. The displacement and violence that have driven the insurgency in the Sahel have land access as one of their deep structural roots. Competition over shrinking arable land as climate change advances desertification, conflict between pastoralist and farming communities, and state allocation decisions that favor some groups over others. Critics inside and outside Burkina Faso have raised the concern that ceding significant tracts of agricultural land to foreign workers, even workers from a non-Western nation operating under a framework presented as mutually beneficial, risks repeating the essential dynamic of land alienation that has historically undermined rural community stability. The Traore government's counterargument is that the arrangement generates employment, transfers agricultural technology, and enhances national food production capacity in ways that benefit the broader population. Those competing claims will play out in real communities, with real consequences over the coming years. The deeper geopolitical question this partnership raises is about the future of the non-alignment project in the contemporary world. The Cold War gave rise to the non-aligned movement, the attempt by decolonizing nations to chart paths independent of both American-led and Soviet-led blocs. That project had mixed results. Many non-aligned nations found that true independence from great power competition was structurally difficult to maintain. The need for security guarantees, for development financing, for technology access, and for trade relationships consistently pulled newly independent states into one orbit or another. What Burkina Faso under Traore is attempting is, in a sense, a 21st century version of that project, but with a significantly more confrontational posture toward the Western institutional order than classic non-alignment assumed. The difference is that today's alternatives to the Western framework include not just Russia, which brings its own complex history of interference in African affairs, but also China's Belt and Road infrastructure model, Gulf state investment appetites, and now, in this unprecedented development, the Pyongyang Security Partnership. The menu of alternatives is larger than it was in 1960. Whether those alternatives ultimately serve Burkinabe citizens better than the arrangements being discarded is the question that history will answer, not analysts in the present moment. What is clear is that the North Korea deal signals something important about the ideological direction of the Traore government. North Korea represents, within the international system, the absolute outer edge of sovereignty maximalism, a state that has chosen, at enormous cost to its population, to prioritize regime survival and national self-determination as defined by its leadership above every other consideration. The parallels that Traore's government implicitly draws by embracing this partnership go beyond practical military cooperation. They represent an ideological statement that Burkina Faso is willing to go as far as necessary, accept as much pressure as necessary, and forge as unconventional alliances as necessary to escape what it characterizes as the neo-colonial security and development trap. The youth of Burkina Faso, a population with a median age below 18, are watching this unfold in real time on smartphones, on social media platforms, where Traore has cultivated a genuinely significant following that extends well beyond his country's borders. The Pan-African online discourse has received the North Korea deal with a mixture of alarm, fascination, and, for a notable segment, admiration. The narrative of a young African captain telling the world's most powerful nations to stand aside while he builds something new resonates emotionally with generations that have grown up watching their country's resources extracted, their politicians captured by external interests, and their populations left behind. The danger in that narrative is that emotional resonance and geopolitical wisdom are not the same thing. History is full of leaders who correctly diagnosed the disease of dependency and then prescribed remedies that created new forms of it. Whether 700 North Korean commandos and a land for security swap represent genuine sovereignty or simply a new form of external entanglement dressed in the language of self-reliance, that is the question that Burkina Faso's next decade will answer. For now, the commandos are there. The equipment is being transferred. The agricultural land is being allocated. And the government of a small landlocked Sahelian nation has done something that will force a rewriting of West African geopolitical maps, not metaphorical maps, but the actual strategic frameworks through which Washington, Paris, Beijing, Moscow, and every regional power thinks about influence, access, and alignment in one of the world's most volatile regions. The alliance of Sahel states has now introduced a North Korean military dimension into an already complex security environment. How ECOWAS responds, and whether it can respond at all, given its limited leverage over the junta governments, remains unclear. how France processes what amounts to the complete collapse of its Sahelian strategic architecture in less than 3 years is a political question that is still reverberating through Paris, and how Washington calibrates its approach to a region where its influence has contracted sharply, while the security vacuum has been filled by actors it considers adversarial or deeply problematic, remains one of the defining foreign policy challenges of the coming years. What Burkina Faso and North Korea have built may be fragile. Military alliances forged in crisis conditions across vast cultural and logistical distances, with asymmetric interests on each side, have historically faced serious durability challenges. North Korean forces operating in a sub-Saharan African environment face linguistic, climatic, logistical, and operational challenges that cannot be waved away. The 700 Commandos are an impressive number on paper. Whether they translate into effective counterinsurgency capacity on Sahelian terrain against a deeply embedded and adaptive adversary is a question of military effectiveness that time alone will resolve. The deeper uncertainty is structural. Burkina Faso is attempting simultaneously to fight an active insurgency, rebuild its economy, manage the displacement of millions of citizens, navigate a food security crisis, construct new institutional relationships with non-Western partners, and project an image of confident sovereignty, all while operating under growing external financial pressure and without the institutional infrastructure of a consolidated state. That is an enormous set of simultaneous demands on any government, let alone one that has been in power for less than 3 years. What happens to the people of Burkina Faso, the farmers in the northern Sahel, the young men in Ouagadougou who have rallied behind Traore's vision, the displaced families in the east, if this gamble does not pay off the way its architects believe it will? That question does not have an easy answer, and it is the question that matters most. The Burkina-North Korea partnership has announced a new era in Sahelian geopolitics. Whether it is an era of genuine sovereignty and restored security, or an era of new dependencies wrapped in the language of liberation, is the defining open question of this moment. The answer will not come from diplomats or analysts. It will come from the ground, from whether the insurgency is beaten back, from whether food reaches communities that need it, from whether the young people of Burkina Faso find themselves more secure and more free in 5 years than they are today. The world is watching. The Sahel is changing faster than the frameworks designed to understand it can keep up. And in a remote capital on the edge of the desert, a 36-year-old captain has placed a bet that will define not just his country's future, but potentially the future of every government across the continent that is watching his moves and deciding whether to follow. Sonnet 4.6